roll for me. Yep.
Okay, the meeting is in order, to order at 7:09. Roll call Adele.
Here.
Alexander Black.
Here.
Chris Trent.
Here.
Susan. Susan.
Albie. Here.
Shelby. Jesse is not here. I am here, Chip Meehan.
Melanie is on her way.
Okay. Tony Knight.
Here.
Good to see you, sir. Scott Mandel, you're here, but you don't really count as that. So we're
Present.
good. 6 of 8.
Awesome. Okay. Let me just go to my trusty little announcements by any government representatives or guests. We just made an announcement. Let's do it officially. Andrew Epstein has come on as a guest today, and he is considering joining the board. He is a landscape architect and has been working with Chip Meehan on greening Studio City projects. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, and he's been on the board of Studio City beautification for the better part of a decade. That precedes me.
So if we don't scare him away today, I'll put him on the board.
If
I
everyone
need to be loud.
Any other comments? I do have a Steve Ferguson coming, and he's going to be here at about 1:15. So he's on the first big agenda item that we're talking about. I wasn't able to get, I don't think George is going to make it, or Laura Friedman. So I do have Steve, and he's willing to talk to us about that, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Any public comment within the committee's jurisdiction, but items not on the agenda? Anybody have a public comment? Peter Cole, do you have anything? Are you even there? No one?
I am here, but I couldn't find my button.
Oh.
I had a public comment, and I was trying to get some pictures to put up. I was just noticing, you've probably all seen that pink rendering that I had made of the Sportsman's Hotel. I was just looking at the aerial footage from Google Earth and just marveling at how they've, pardon my expression, raped that land of trees. Because in Google Earth, you can go zoom back in time, and it's been great all these years, and it's horrible, you know. And now with phase 2 of this project, there's going to be nothing left but the twigs that they're required to add. So anyway, just observation. Thanks.
Could you quickly show that view of that, since you're making a public comment on that, and maybe make a public comment about the different meetings that are coming up that people might want to go to?
That would require me to remember my notes. I don't have the image ready. I was scrambling to play with Photoshop here to get that ready. But this coming Wednesday at 7 p.m., there is an important agenda item on Sportsman's, on the new residences at Sportsman's Lodge. I think it's item number 13 that we all need to join in and listen, join in and comment on. And then you have to refresh my memory what day. I've just been scrambling all day. What is it? The city planning?
Monday the 21st.
That's at 11 a.m. And that's probably even more important for everybody to join in and comment on. That
is with the city planning department to talk about the proposed project at Sportsman's Lodge. Well, I mean, it's where the hotel used to be. Yeah. The landing's already been built.
One thing that we've been, we're trying to find how to convey to everybody just how large this project is. It's large. Everybody knows the IKEA in Burbank. Well, it's significantly more square footage than that. And I'm sure we'll find some other comparisons, but it's outrageously large. So
And just for sustainability issues, they are planning on taking out 89 trees. And as far as I can see, there's no place to plant any new trees. There's just no place. They're developing it gate to gate. And by that, they're asking, one of their exceptions is, of course, Diana Nicole, who is now no longer on the committee, is texting me like crazy. What the F?
one other thing on the trees is the parking lot where they were required to add those twigs in the parking lot. Those are all going to be torn out for the new project. I don't get it. The city says they're two separate entities. These two projects are to be looked at separately, but they're tearing out the trees for project A to put a parking garage for project B. So I don't get it.
So anyway, come to the meeting on Wednesday night to hear about that. And then there's a city planning meeting on Monday, the 21st. If you could weigh in, that would be fantastic. Public comment from Richard Niederberg.
Yeah, obviously, my concern is trying to bring back the swans. They probably won't. More importantly, can sustainability deal with the wildlife coming off Mulholland into the southern part of Studio City, Laurelwood, exactly? There are creatures out there, including but not limited to mountain lions. I wish that sustainability deal with that. Thank you.
I keep forgetting to put it on the agenda. I need to find some, I'll talk to you about it offline, Richard, and we can see what we can do. Okay?
Sure, there's more than just plants that need to be sustained.
Right. Correct. Okay. Any other comments from the not on the agenda, items not on the agenda? Okay. Not seeing any hands raised. I am going to move on to number 4, item number 4, and we have a guest who is going to speak to us. So this is a discussion. Given the emerging information about forever chemicals and other environmental problems with artificial turf, what steps can we take to change the state California Code, Government Code GOV 53087.7, which states a city, including a charter city, county, or city and county, shall not enact any ordinance or regulation or enforce any existing ordinance or regulation that prohibits the installation of drought-tolerant landscaping, synthetic grass, or artificial turf on residential property. And just a little bit of, reframing. We had, there was a symposium last week, and we had the guests from PEER, which is a group that discovered that there is PFAS in the blades of grass and the backing of artificial turf. There is so much of it. I mean, because the EPA's ban is going to, this next couple of months, they're going to put out a ban on it in parts per trillion. And there is more, there's a lot of it. And PEER had the actual turf that Harvard Westlake is planning to use on their property tested, and it has significant PFAS and PFOS and other chemicals too. There's something called something 65. I have the report if anyone's interested in seeing it. And so they are banning synthetic turf all over the country. They've banned it in Boston. Millbrae has banned it. Now, because here in California, because of that code, Millbrae had to do a temporary ban. They couldn't do a permanent ban because the code says you can't ban it. But the city it's a small little city around San Francisco, Millbrae is. It's quite near the water. And they don't want to contaminate the water, nor do we want to contaminate the water here in Studio City. So, we want to figure out how to get some legislation before the state and how to stop this, because in Studio City, there's massive amounts of artificial turf going in. And people are just really unaware of there's more. And by the way, the forever chemicals are one part of how bad it is. The heat island effect is another part of how bad it is. The injuries to athletes, which is what the NFL is trying to, the NFL players are trying to get the people who own the NFL to stop using artificial turf. So it's an emerging issue in our country today, and I think we need to be ahead of the curve. So first, I'm going to recognize Andrew if you have a question, and then I want to let Steve talk more clearly about how to do the bill type thing.
Why is drought tolerant landscaping part of this discussion?
It isn't drought tolerant it's not that, it's that they lumped artificial turf with drought tolerant landscape, because you see the state in this. So, and let me just explain why that happened too. I can very easily explain. When in the beginning, artificial turf, even Melanie will say, and she's going to be here a little bit later, Melanie Winter, at first they thought artificial turf, what a great thing. It's going to help us save water. And they didn't really realize all of the detrimental issues with artificial turf. Also, I have to say that the companies who have made artificial turf are it's the oil industry that's made, it's plastic, it's plastic and oil. And they are doing a very good job of advertising and making it seem so appealing. This is going to save water. We're in a drought, la la la. But the truth is that it's going to create more problems than it solves. Because one other problem that will happen is when we have a mega storm, which we will have here, the flooding will be disastrous because there's no earth to absorb the water. And so it's, and it kills the soil underneath our artificial grass. So there's no worms, there's no aeration, there's just like, it has a cascading environmental effect that people just didn't really realize, because they looked at the one issue, which is, oh, it saves water. And it turns out it actually doesn't save water, because you have to water the fields so that kids don't get infections. And so that when it's too hot, when it's like 90 degrees out, a field can be upwards of 50 degrees hotter than that. And so if they want to play on a field, you have to water the field down before they can play. So these are some of the list of things that are detrimental about artificial turf is quite long.
I'm aware of all that. I'm just saying, when I saw drought tolerant.
Oh, that's why, because when it was at a time when we were trying to.
It's a revision of the language.
But right now, it's law that you can't ban people from using artificial turf on their lawns, and people are doing it, and I don't think they're aware of, the PFAS, the forever chemicals, or all the other problems really. So anyway, I'd like to give the floor to Steve, and you have as much time as you want.
Well, thank you. I will try not to take too much advantage of that, but definitely do my best to be available for questions. If I don't have the answer tonight, please forgive me. I'm happy to circle back with Adele and pass along the information. My name is Steve Ferguson. I serve as Assembly Member Nazarian's District Director, and was invited to participate to talk a little bit about the legislative process for which you can advocate and attempt to kind of escalate issues so that they can be addressed with potential legislation. Assemblymember Nazarian has served nearly a decade in the legislature and will be leaving office November 30th. And so after redistricting There are new members of the Assembly who will be representing different portions of the San Fernando Valley. After November's election, it's pretty clear that Assemblywoman Friedman will be representing the 44th Assembly District, which includes Studio City. So I'm wishing her nothing but the best, and we will be continuing to work with her office to ensure there's a very smooth transition in place. Having said that, I wanted to give just kind of a brief overview of just kind of what can be done and generally what is done around legislation. So we are headed into kind of the prime legislative period which will start really in January. The legislature will start assembling in December, usually for the election of officers and really some pro forma sessions to introduce new pieces of legislation. Legislation is then heard and introduced throughout the month of December and into the month of January. So it really is kind of, it's right around the corner. And then the legislation will then be published. There are certain waiting periods for different forms of legislation. If there is a fiscal impact, it will need to be heard by the Budget Committee and the Appropriations Committee, along with its subcommittee that relates to its issue area, so the environment, et cetera. Assemblywoman Friedman has a long track record of environmental action and activism. And so more than anything, as you engage in this, this is somebody who I know will be a good partner in this conversation and will be very understanding. The bill itself, so more than anything, it really comes together with how it's put together here at the local level, what those recommendations are. So you as a neighborhood council subcommittee can certainly start the conversation here, develop usually resolution language that can outline specifics around the points that you really would like addressed, and then escalate that usually to a full resolution, which the council would adopt, and then you would be able to move forward with lobbying efforts. You may, at that point in time, strategically may want to reach out to your council members, Nithya Raman, as well as Council President Paul Krikorian, potentially to get their buy-in and support, which would also then, again, kind of help and help escalate the issue and its importance. Along with any other neighborhood councils in the region as well. It also helps, for instance, to work within the district. So Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council, Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council, Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council, et cetera. You know, building kind of a coalition is really what's helpful. So that way, those members who are representing such broad constituencies, frankly, can really help tell the story, frankly, that this is a district-wide concern that they're escalating. And so it's not, just a simple piece of legislation that's of interest to one member. It really is representative of the views of many communities. And so that is kind of, and so what you will have is bills that will go through, they will be considered, again, if they have fiscal impact around June for the state budget. So you want to be considerate of that. And then bills really need to be passed out of both houses by August. At that point, it will head to the governor for signature or veto, and the governor will have 30 days, roughly, depending on the bill, to sign that bill or veto it. Vetoes are traditionally not overridden in this state. And so if a bill is vetoed, it is pretty much considered dead at that point in time. Some bills, if they have had some traction or there's some mechanical issues, et cetera, may become what's called two-year bills. And so they will continue along in the cycle. Obviously, because the legislature is in session for 2 years, that will prolong the life of the bill and kind of give it another bite at the apple as the year comes around again. The legislature adjourns in early September, and as they wait for signature on a lot of the bills, and then the cycle starts all over again in December and January when bills are introduced, et cetera. So that is a quick kind of rundown of how kind of the timeline works with legislation. But again, I would recommend more than anything, wanting to get your points all in a document that you can start really building consensus on, building coalitions around, and then escalating that with elected officials, et cetera, to try and get that done. If the neighborhood council at that point wants to have individual meetings with either the assembly office, the state senate office as well, all of those are great options, but really recommend you pull in advocacy organizations that support your positions. Again, other neighborhood council offices, potentially other local political party groups as well. All of these could potentially be allies as you escalate the importance of issues. Members of the legislature tend to escalate anywhere between 10 to 15 bills on average, and have, some success. It really depends on the year. And it also depends, obviously, on the fiscal situation of the state. If the state is in a good fiscal situation, they may be more willing to take on bills that may have a cost. In what else may be a consideration, for instance, if it has a one-time cost or if it has recurring costs. Those are all different. As the state, for instance, in this last budget session had a lot of one-time money, but really was, rather reticent to kind of take on recurring costs due to economic, really instability. So that's generally just points to consider. I know that's a lot of information relatively quickly, and I apologize if I moved quickly, but want to respect your time and really just make myself available for questions and hope that that was helpful.
Very helpful, yes. Does anyone have any questions? I have a question, actually. When you say fiscal impact, would losing artificial turf have a fiscal impact?
So there are a number of ways that it would be shocking at times, but yes, there are a number of ways that, for instance, could have impacts. For instance, the regulatory component of it. So if there is an agency that would be responsible for enforcing that mechanism, that agency would then require more than likely an appropriation from the state budget in order to enforce that. If there was. So that's where you really want to work with your member of the legislature to structure the bill in a way to be cognizant of that fact. So again, you want to, again, see if you can work with Assemblywoman Friedman and if you can say, hey, we want to minimize fiscal impacts with this. Is there a way we can structure it? And her staff can work with legislative council and a number of other kind of agencies that work with the legislature as they draft these pieces of legislation.
I'm going to go to Chip in a minute, but I just want to say, which you couldn't possibly have known, but the Studio City Residents Association had Laura Friedman, come to a meeting, and somebody asked her about artificial turf, and she was very knowledgeable about it and very, very against it, and basically said she would not let her children play on that because of the poisonous chemicals. I mean, it's not a,
Yeah, well, I know there's a question, and in my other life, I happen to serve as vice president of the Burbank Unified School District Board of Education, and we have artificial turf at both of our comprehensive high schools, and it is quite the deal to make sure that they are maintained, and it is also a concern. There's basically, we have a Zamboni-like car, so to speak, that goes over and has to clean so that we can work, make sure that staph infections and other things like that are not passed on to our students. So there are certainly impacts with it. You do have to cool it at times, otherwise you can incur burns. So there are definitely side effects to utilizing artificial turf, and that's before you get to groundwater recharge and a number of other issues that you highlighted previously in your comments. So, I think it was an answer certainly for one time, and it certainly helps with some maintenance, but again, the long term, there are significant impacts, and it doesn't shock me as Assemblywoman Friedman has represented Burbank since joining the legislature, that she would be aware of that, and a number of other schools within her district that have utilized synthetic turf.
Yeah. Chip?
Steve, thanks very much for doing all that. I know you've got a busy day job. Is there a manual? And you mentioned the staph infections, and that is an element of the maintenance that we've not seen. And clearly what we need to do is put together the bullet points that Adele mentioned, which we're all kind of saying in it's like call and response to prayer at this point. So we need to actually have, there's 7 or 10 points as to why we don't like it. We need to have the bibliography on the back. And I know Alexander has probably 100 documents, if not more. So that's supporting. But we also need to do a timeline over the 7 to 10 years in which an artificial turf field will be there, and show the cost to maintain that and the resources that need to be expended in terms of water and everything else. I'd never heard of a Zamboni type machine. One,
Yep.
I want to drive it. And two, we need to take a look at that. But staff is something we'd always heard about, and we didn't. Is there a manual that discusses how to keep this hygienically safe?
So I'm not sure if there's a strict manual, so to speak. I can tell you, our process occurred years ago, probably I want to say close to 10 years ago, and it was a part of the presentations that were delivered at that time by the vendor who was being considered at that time, and then they basically talked about mitigation measures and how that would be maintained. So in a lot of, frankly, the presentation material of the vendors who are presenting it, they are required to list potential issues along with mitigation measures that are required in order to maintain the field. A lot of those mitigation measures are required to maintain the warranty of the field itself, so that if there are tears or issues and things like that. So so no specific manual per se that just kind of hovers above all, but I would say that individual manufacturers should have some level of publication that addresses a lot of those issues. I can certainly look into seeing if I can connect with who our manufacturer is in the Burbank Unified School District to see, what that looks like on my end, and potentially pass that along if I can find it. But that I would definitely look at more of the manufacturers who, again, I know aren't always the greatest source of truth in these moments, in the sense that they are fully disclosing, but the mitigation measures and the impacts, for instance, really are stories better told by those who are impacted and those communities who are impacted by it. But I will definitely look into that and see if I can pass that information along. If I can find it, absolutely will.
Once we get this document done, Steve, which is, we're concerned, we'd like a moratorium. The findings of the moratorium will give credibility to potentially reversing this piece of legislation. So we should get to Nithya as soon as possible and CD4 to see if she can help us start to move quickly on the moratorium. Assemblyperson Friedman, to start with the legislation, what do you think about the state attorney general? Because I saw that they're suing the EPA for, I believe it was PFAS. I saw that earlier this week or over the weekend. Would it be appropriate to ask the state attorney general to investigate whether or not the vendors selling this stuff are potentially being fraudulent? Because that's the specter that is part of the talking narrative. If it's not true, we should stop saying it. But we're starting to say this feels like big tobacco in the mid 60s.
So as for strategy and who you want to approach, that really is your call. I will say, working with local assembly members, et cetera, they can often escalate issues to those offices, to our 7 statewide constitutional offices that grant it, greater attention in a way that sometimes local bodies have a harder time getting kind of the time and energy to do. So because it takes a lot of time. It's a lot of, I thank you for crediting me with a busy job. Half of the time is really navigating the bureaucracy and learning how and who to call and things like that. So, but when you have assembly offices, you do have people that frankly will pick up the phone. So for instance, each of our offices has legislative liaisons with the different offices, with the different agencies that often can get answered faster than constituents can. And that's unfortunate, but it's honest. So I would say your assembly person, your state senator, these are really big allies who can quite literally not just get, their staffs can connect with these agency heads, or these officers, but quite literally sometimes a member of the state assembly could text the attorney general, right? And that is a completely different access that is, at times, just unparalleled, frankly, when you're trying to reach from a local level. So, not necessarily, again, trying to dissuade in any way, but I would say, working with your local officials helps escalate it that much faster.
So in essence, we, by writing, by developing the language of a resolution, we do the legwork for our assemblyman or per woman, and then they can then take it to the next level, basically, if we do our legwork properly.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's something certainly that, I think it's important to build consensus locally and then escalate, so if there's a resolution that's able to be passed by the broader council, then you can meet with your assemblywoman and she can really guide you and offer, hey, these are the pitfalls. This is what I'm up against, et cetera. There's a number of industries. You mentioned the oil industry in California. Look, like as much as this is a pro-environmental state, that industry certainly has a number of districts that really truly they have great economic power over and create great economic impact, and so that can create some fracturing within some of the caucus, the Democratic caucus, which right now is the vast majority. It's the 2/3 majority of the state assembly and the state legislature. So again, I really do say that once you have a resolution that says, hey, this isn't just the whim of a minority of the council, but instead really the position of the council, to really then engage with them and become strategy partners and thought partners with them, because they will guide you as to what the pitfalls and what the challenges and the hurdles look like.
Yeah. Richard, did you have a comment?
I just had one question. I'm wondering, basically, has there already been studies made as to what the effect is of head injuries on artificial turf versus real grass? In that right now, there's a lot of things focusing with football and helmets and injuries of that nature. Does it make a difference? Is there anything out there first that can tell me?
So off the top of my head, thank you for the question. So off the top of my head, not that I've been made aware of, and there's been a great deal of work put into, frankly, modernizing helmets in football, even for high school and non-collegiate play. So, but CIF regulates local games and games at the high school level, and they may be a great resource to reach out to see if there's any potential impacts, or at least if they have taken any positions on the impacts of artificial turf versus, real turf.
Thank you.
I do know, Richard, I do know that a lot of the injuries on artificial turf are like leg injuries, what is that? The ASL, ACL. And because what happens is the cleats get stuck and grab the foot, and actually it happened in the Super Bowl. That I can't remember the guy who got and some of the injuries, they're lifelong injuries. You don't recover from them. And so that is more, and then there's the heat with cleats melting and, and people getting burns and things like that. So I think it's more the lower body really getting impacting. I don't know. I haven't read, I haven't seen, and I'll look for, and I'll find out about head injuries if that's also part of it.
And guys, it's Alexander here. Let's not forget that there's a lot of sports played on these artificial fields that have nothing to do with a helmet. Soccer, field hockey, lacrosse. And so there's a lot of anecdotal, and there's a lot of other solid evidence out there of the difference, but we have to get it, and we'll put that as part of our narrative. So
thanks, Alice. They're good point. Good point. Tony, thanks for patiently waiting.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just going to say, having spent my whole career in public education as an administrator, and then something that Steve would be aware of as well, is that any kind of legislation that we would attempt to influence or write, public schools are under the Field Act. That's an easy one to remember, called the Field Act. And that basically means that local building codes, regulations, et cetera, don't apply to any California public school or California public charter school. So they have their own set of regulations to the Office of Public School Construction and the Office of the State Architect. So you'd have to be careful if you wrote something that was like local kind of, it wouldn't apply to any public school. It would apply to a private school, but it wouldn't apply to a public one. So they have their own set of rules. So like if you wanted to build something in a public school, you don't go get a local building permit. It's all done through the state. No local building codes apply to public schools. So that would be something that you need to be aware of, because that's a big target. That's the huge, market for artificial turf, probably the biggest in California and around the country, And then I wanted to comment about the injuries. One of the other things that you'll hear on the other side is that in Oak Park, we had a tremendous amount of injuries and still do on the natural turf fields because of gopher holes and other things like that. The holes are tremendous, especially in areas that border wild areas. And then you have the problem of how do you get rid of them? And so the IPM on this is a little bit crazy. You can try CO2 injections, carbon monoxide injections, gassing them, poisons, etc. But you would not believe the amount of injuries that you have on natural turf fields because of the holes that the animals make. And then to get rid of them is nearly impossible. So that's what you'll hear from Hellas and the other companies that make the artificial turf. I agree with you 100% that we shouldn't be using artificial turf anymore, but I'm just telling you what they're going to tell you. And, going back to the practicalities of this is what you'll hear from parents and from sports teams and schools, that they can't deal with the natural turf. It's like money is limited, and they would rather put the money up front and be done, basically, rather than this constant renovation of fields and then dealing with the problems. That's what happens.
And that's and that is a great point. And I will say that and trust me, that our own process of moving through the division of the state architect, et cetera, is a long process in and of itself as well. But it's a good point, nevertheless, that when we are considering legislation, you really do have to comprehensively think about its impacts. And yes, there is absolutely cost savings in some ways to not having to reseed turf, for instance. And again, you may have heard there are hiring shortages right and left, especially within government, especially within local school districts who, again, don't have the ability to unilaterally raise revenue without a parcel tax, which requires a 2/3 vote. There's now been court decisions that say it could be a majority vote, but nevertheless. So legislation that's sweeping like this will have impacts differently on different communities. And so as you're thinking through that, you may want to have carve-outs. You may want to have a phase out plan or things like that, that again, would create potentially impacts. And this is where, again, you will have, for instance, fiscal impacts that will be in place. So, and although turf is, artificial turf does save some money, there is significant upkeep. I think our Burbank fields are roughly $1 million or so that, again, we are putting aside money annually for when those turf warranties are up in order to replace. So there still are ongoing costs. It's just about, again, trying to make this cost effective. Again, we don't have gophers to deal with. That's a great point, though, because, again, you're regulating a state that has to deal with everything from the climate of the border communities to the rainy northern part of this state that really do have very diverse needs.
Well, and then the other thing that is happening now, and there are people developing a more sustainable turf that is more durable, and there's bunches of different people doing that for me, gopher holes is not as big of a problem as forever chemicals dripping into our water, and that sort of trumps everything, no pun intended. Just the chemicals that are, can cause endocrine problems in kids. And, I just think that's a non-starter. So but it's good to know all the issues, it's good to be able to say, hey, you know, what's the solution to gopher holes, or, you know, how can we help with that? You know, how does this, you know, and I don't have an answer for that, like offhand, you
Well,
know.
Adele, part of this is going to be the economics of it that we're all talking about, a larger picture that has to be painted about further down the road of what is coming. And what is coming is going to be two things. Number one is going to be the EPA labeling that will go on all artificial turf that exists in the ground and soon, and any that goes in the ground before any moratoriums or bans. And that labeling will show Prop 65 labeling, whether you're a marginalized community or an affluent community. You will now see that the artificial turf that your kids, that your athletes are playing on is indeed a cancerous product that they're playing on, inhaling and absorbing through their skin, absorbing through microplastic and as it breaks down. I'm working on an inside narrative that we're getting out of the industry that shows a pattern that they have a planned obsolescence based on the fact that any public or private entity that utilizes artificial turf does not, if they do not adhere to a very strict program that keeps up the warranty, then the company can say, sorry, it was your fault. You didn't water it enough. You didn't take care of it enough. And that plastic is falling apart and yes, coming apart because of something you did, not because of something that they warranted. I mean, sorry, that they feel that they didn't get the chance to come up to, they're supposed to, after a while, they're supposed to actually replace the product, but they're making certain guidelines, you know, you have to keep to. But here's the biggest thing, guys. I'm at Angel Stadium next week with Soil Solutions, the gentleman who was so kind to show up at our symposium. And I'm being invited to Angel Stadium and several other in the ground places where they have given a thumbs up to natural grass for athletic play. And I'm going to be bringing those places to light with this gentleman, and we're going to bring that to Campbell Hall. We're going to bring that to Notre Dame. We're going to bring that to Harvard Westlake and say, here is your alternative. Here is a lot of brand new dynamic opportunities that are coming out of UC Riverside and other university groups here in California that are working very hard on very exciting new fescues, tall grasses, Bermuda, strains of Bermuda that will indeed solve a lot of these problems. Quick growing, low water, and working and not just denying the fact that there's probably a gopher issue here and there, but that's something I think that we can all be working on as well. Anyway, I just want everybody to stay tuned to those two areas that I think the industry itself will soon, it'll come to light as we really stare down the barrel of what the artificial turf industry has been up to. And then the labeling, I think will get very loud and clear. And I'm going to put something out very shortly that I hope everybody will start to look at and say, wow, this is going to really impact, I believe, the narrative that's in the minds of the parents and the athletic directors out there who will start to look at the litigation that will soon come that will cost them millions. And they'll say, well, this ain't worth it, folks. Even if we think we're saving here, we're going to be spending it down the road. But I can't prove it yet, but we're going to be hopefully really looking at that as something that's going to be problematic for any of these fields.
Any other questions from the audience or anybody? Thank you so much, Steve. You're amazing.
Well, my privilege and just again, on behalf of Assemblymember Nazarian, it's been really, truly the privilege of a lifetime to be able to serve the incredible community of Studio City. There's a lot of work to keep Studio City great, but it is such an incredible community to be a part of. So thank you for the opportunity to serve and to be here. Even though I will be leaving, I am a big fan. Adele, you have my number. Please feel free to reach out if I can ever be assistance, and good luck with your meeting, and thank you for your work.
Thank you. And Steve, where are you guys going?
So we will see. The assembly member, I think, is looking for a nice little break, frankly, after 10 years and frankly, enjoying time with his young kiddos, where he doesn't have to fly up to Sacramento weekly and to do the work. But having said that, finishing a decade strong, founding the Cal Kids program, which is a statewide college savings program that now 3.4 million kids now have college savings accounts. So we're leaving after a busy term. I hope certainly to stay around, and if so, please say hi, because I really have. This has been the job of a lifetime, and I've enjoyed connecting with so many people who care so deeply about the future of this area. And again, I'm just in Burbank, so I'm right next door. So we'll see you around for certain.
Thanks so much, Steve. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. So just to end this discussion, maybe can I just ask if Chip, Alex, and maybe Tony and I might get our heads together and start to put some language together on this?
Sure.
I think it's important to have Tony because he understands the other side.
Well, and this way Tony can do penance for all the acres of plastic turf he put down over.
It's true. I have a lot to do. Yeah. Luckily, it was only one field done twice.
But yeah, I think, I think we could put together some language for, a resolution. And I know that Laura Friedman is very sympathetic to this.
Yeah. I'll put together an outline and send it to the four of you guys, the three of you
Okay,
guys.
perfect. Brilliant. Thank you.
And your entire committee is here now.
Oh, Melanie's here? Jesse's
Jesse
here?
and Melanie have come in.
Hey, okay, great. I'm glad you're here. Okay, moving on to item number 5. Discussion and possible motion, City Council File 22-12-38, Oak Tree Deposits Funding Relocation Public Works Trust Fund number 834. Here are the disturbing elements of this project revealed during the hearing at the Board of Public Works. $666,000 collected for oak woodland preservation and mitigation is being relocated to plant 154 oak trees in medians around the city, despite the existence over $2 million in the Public Works Trust Fund for street plantings, and even more funds allocated for tree plantings in another Public Works Trust Fund from the DWP City Plants. $250,000 of the $666,000 is being used for staff salaries and overtime. Over $340,000 of the $666,000 is just to be used for watering the 150 oak trees, I think for 5 years, by the way. 4,351 per tree. Do I need to read all that? You get it, right? Board of Public Works worked on this plan in secret for some 9 months without notice, input, or participation from affected communities and without participation from stakeholders. Board of Public Works claimed that the outreach to the affected council districts was provided, but personnel at Council District 4 denied receiving any information or outreach about this project. The coalition letters and public comments in opposition were mostly ignored by the commissioners. Instead, the vast majority of their discussion surrounded splitting up 15 of the oak trees proposed for CD7 between the other council districts. The relocation of oak woodland mitigation funds collected from developers may not stop here. At the hearing, Rachel Malarick, Office of LA Forest Management, said that the tree bond for the current protected tree ordinance can also be used for street tree planting when it is forfeited because the applicant never planted the required replacement trees or requested the replacement tree bond back. This reallocation of funds for staff salaries with a minimal impact on increasing oak trees is an unacceptable use of oak woodland mitigation funds and would set a terrible precedent for the future if it passes. And then I attached 2 letters that hopefully you read about this issue. I want to just say one thing. I was reaching out to in my contact at Jamie York at Encino NC about this, and they're going to plant 15 oak trees, and it's going to cost them $25,000 just to get a rough, like, wait a minute. She just thought that is a lot of money to plant 154 oak trees. I think we get 4 of them in Studio City. We get 4 oak trees on this from this thing. And so I do believe that the Board of Public Works has already passed this and they're sending it on. But if we do a CIS, a community impact statement, or not in support of this, it might have some impact. It may not. I think that it's possible that they're getting money so that they can pay their staff, basically. I mean, that's the large reason why they're doing this, because the money, that money from those other accounts can only go to the trees. It can't go to staff salaries. And so they're trying to, it's kind of a little bit of a bait and switch. So
this is reallocating earmarked funds to a project that was different from which the funds were originally intended.
right. So the funds were originally intended. So they collected funds, like my neighbor, for example, cut down an 80-year-old oak tree. They had to pay into a in lieu account for 3 trees to replace 3 replacement trees. Now there's no room on her piece of property to plant those 3 replacement trees. Far as I know, they didn't get planted anywhere. So that money that she put into the in lieu fund has been sitting there. And that's happened all over the city. There are millions of dollars in the in lieu fund.
So people see it as a fine, not really mitigation.
Correct.
I just took a look. Those letters were written a month ago that went in from SCRA.
Yeah.
Do you think board or committee, it's too late to do anything? It sounds like it already went in a month ago. And it just seems that we have this habit of coming in after the bell went off.
Unfortunately, or what you hear about these things just as they're like going by the wind, just as they're going by. But the city council file is going to be open for a while. And I think that there's no shame in writing a CIS and just weighing in on it. I don't know, I don't think that it's a bad thing to do. I don't think.
So the process would be, because we're probably not going to be very successful at just doing it in committee here on the fly. So do you want to just come up with something brief saying that we stand in support of Hillside Federation and SCRA and everybody else? Can we get a vote after this meeting? How does that work with the Brown Act?
Well, no, what we would do is we could just write down something very simple that you just said. We could vote on that as our CIS and just attach it to those letters that I put on in the agenda. We just attach it and say, we're not in support of this, of whatever this thing is. Go back. Oh, sorry.
But doesn't the board the full SCNC board has to vote on it, and the next meeting is Wednesday, so it wouldn't be for a January meeting?
Right, it would be for a January meeting, that's right. But listen, I also have the zoo, finally, Diana wrote the zoo motion, which also is gonna go for a January meeting, because.
Do you want to have then a special meeting to do the zoo and the oaks?
Yeah.
Okay.
We could do that. We could have a special meeting. We could write up the motion. The motion for this should be pretty simple. Just, we don't support it. And here's the attachment of why. Right. And then, our biggest problem is making sure that we give enough information to the board so they can make an informed decision. because the board, if they don't get enough information, they won't do it. If they feel like we give them short shrift in any way, they will not vote it. As a matter of fact, we voted to go ahead and send the zoo motion in after, Diana wrote it. But Diana wrote it and Scott was like, if you send this in now, the board is going to kick it back to committee saying, why didn't the committee vote on it? And that's the way the board is, so we could have a special meeting for both.
We need to do that because I also think we need to speak with Diana or someone else, because it seems that there's a differentiation made in the first bullet point about 154 trees for medians when there is another trust fund for street plantings. So that means to me, and I could be mistaken, that these mitigating oak trees are not meant to be planted as street trees, but to be planted in a woodland someplace.
No, they're going to be planted as street trees. They
But
should be
But
planted.
is that the intent, or was that the intent of the original legislation,
Yes,
that they would be street trees?
yes.
Because if that's the case, this doesn't make sense, because this is decrying 154 oak trees and medians, and then in bold, despite the existence of $2 million in street tree money.
So,
Why don't
so,
we do, you want to do this?
no, you're not understanding.
No.
There's money from the in lieu fee. That's what they're taking the over $500,000 from. It's that's not street trees. There's another pocket of money called street tree money. They
Right.
have street tree money. Board of Public Works has over $2 million in street tree money, but they're taking money from the in lieu fee pocket.
Where
Why?
is the,
And why? Wait, let me just explain why. Why? Because if you take money from the street tree money, it has to only go to street trees. But if you take money from the in lieu fee, don't ask me why, they can allocate it for the watering and for the salaries.
so where are those in lieu trees intended to be planted?
They
If
should be
not street trees.
They should be planted on private land because that's where they were taken off of private land. And they should be planted, they should be making groves or, I actually don't know the full on answer to that one. Do you?
Yeah, we're gonna need to figure that out before we take it to the board.
Yeah. Chris? Trent?
Yes, hi. So I have a question. The money that was collected that went in lump sum, how was that calculated? Was it calculated?
I did not, you broke up. What? The money, what?
Money that's collected for the in lieu fee for people who are cutting down trees, is that the amount of money that they pay? So did it include extra money, salaries, or was it just the cost of a tree?
Correct. B.
Okay. Yes, that doesn't make sense to use it for all that other stuff that it wasn't intended for.
Right. Right.
You're going to buy a whole lot less trees.
Right. I think it's clear, isn't that clear in those letters that, Chip, isn't all that clear in those letters? The second one is a more clear, the one that Travis Longcore wrote is much more clear than the first one. Did you read those thoroughly? It's in the link in the agenda, Andrew, if you wanted to take a look at it.
I saw, yeah,
Yeah.
I saw it. Do you have any idea where these medians are that these trees are supposed to go? The only reason I ask is you have to have a really big median to put an oak tree in.
Yeah, I don't actually know.
I mean, there was actually an instance where a city council office offered us beautification, an oak tree in a median, and then realized the median was far too narrow for a tree that size.
That's a really good question.
And the other thing is, usually when we plant trees, either privately or through beautification, it's usually a year of watering, and then the tree usually finds its own source by then. So 5 years seems incredibly excessive for watering a tree, but that's just.
Yeah, I'll take you're right. The second one does reference other documents, but we'll need to tighten up whether or not they literally can do this. You know, are they legally free to divert money, or have they been caught in doing something that they're not supposed to do? And the other thing with regard to the size of the oaks, I'm also curious if we could use a scrub oak, for example. I mean, when we think of oaks now, we all think of either valley oaks or California live oaks. There are smaller and medium size oaks that will do fine down here, and they're not available as much. So we should actually investigate that as well. Maybe get Charles in on that. Charles Miller. But I think we need to play with this a little bit to make sure that we're well-founded, because to your point about the board potentially being skeptical, if we don't do the homework and don't have an answer, it's not going to go anywhere.
Yep. Agreed. So maybe
I make a motion, we table that until your special meeting in December.
yeah. Yep.
Would someone second my motion?
Second.
Thank you.
Call for a vote. Any discussion? No discussion, call for a vote. All in favor? Unanimous,
Yes.
unanimous.
Okay, that moves.
Jesse said yes, he's raising his hand. And, okay. Okay, so that's tabled. Discussion of calendar for 2023 to include quarterly cleanup, quarterly seminar for Q&A for community, outreach to community, website for Sustainability Committee. We need a tech whiz and to have links to other organizations, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to let Chip talk about this topic.
This is one of the, thank you, Adele. This is one of the topics we've brought up a couple times, and every single volunteer organization has the same inbreeding problem. We need more outreach. And we thought the more we create Studio City Neighborhood Council as a information source for the community, vertically by committees, the more we'll have people interacting with the neighborhood council. And so if there was something as simple as the kids are home for Thanksgiving week, they have volunteer hours they need to satisfy for their school, what projects could I do? If they went to the sustainability website, to our page on the SCNC website, we could link to Tree People, for example. We could link to Friends of the LA River. And there are calendars in those organizations' websites, which are very robust, and they have tons of opportunities for volunteering. So the idea was to link our website to organizations that are consistent with the thinking and mission of sustainability. Then we also thought we could put together potentially a calendar. It's something we've talked about before, but I particularly was intrigued on Sunday when I went to the peer artificial turf meeting over at the church on Whitsett. There was a great deal of focus on the artificial turf, but we had a ton. We had Theodore Payne that was there. Melanie Winter was there from the River Project, who's here now, with really interesting information, as not just generically, what are we doing in terms of water? What do we need to do more? But also what's happening on the Sepulveda Dam Basin. So Adele and I were talking about potentially having once a quarter a a symposium. And maybe it is something where we have Zooms for an hour and we reach out and we have the River Project, Friends of the LA River. You know, we end up having the various river organizations sit down and run through their pitch. Everyone gets 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and there's a Q&A. That might be useful. So there might be an opportunity to reach out to the community to these SCNC Sustainability sanctioned symposiums, talks. So that was the idea. It's like a party. You don't want to have a party and no one shows. But the idea was to put together a calendar. Anyone think that's a terrible idea?
Anyone think it's a good idea?
I think it's a great idea.
As far as thank you, Alex, appreciate the company line. You know, does Fiona have an email yet? We can get that from Scott potentially and talk to Scott and see what kind of rules there are. Clearly, if we could get a high school student as part of her outreach, they are far more facile than I am certainly on the social media stuff, and they could come in as they're trying to do something to burnish their resumes for college applications, to jump on and connect us to the various other websites and start to understand how the website architecture works. And once they figure out how that works for sustainability, they could potentially take that skill set and offer it to the homeless group, offer it to transportation, offer it to government affairs, offer it to, you know, the other committees to get these website pages being more interactive. That's the idea. So I'll reach out to Fiona with Scott's blessing and see if there are any of her classmates who want to ruin their Christmas break by coming in and doing this.
Well, they don't have to come in. They can do it online.
Right, that's exactly right. But we need to get them, we need to figure out with Brandon what they need to get cleared. And I guess get some level of administrator rights to the page.
Yeah.
But I think it really would be a tremendous project for someone to do. And if we could just keep circulating people through it.
Yep. Love it. Richard Niederberg, you had a comment?
Yeah, we used to have a spring fling, something like that, every year. Normally it was at the Livet Amphitheater. That's where in Valley Heart, where I forget what street intersected. There's a small amphitheater there. We used to have events there of this nature. It seems to me that we could use the same area again and have more events of this nature. It's still within Studio City. It's still, you know, it still has seats, you know, so it's the kind of thing you could do easily. It might be more interesting than doing everything by Zoom.
You mean do a symposium in the amphitheater?
Five, yes.
Well, we had at the symposium on Sunday, for about 40 people showed up and 47 people were on Zoom. So it was kind of like, a little bit of both, but it was incredibly complicated to throw, you know, to put together. So.
Just an idea.
Yeah, no. We could do both. We could do one in person and we could do one on Zoom. We could do them, you know. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do a hybrid again. Oh, that was awful. Melanie.
Yeah, I'll just say that the events, the Green Living Fair that Lisa Cahan Davis organized for several years when she chaired this committee, were an insane amount of work. And I can't emphasize just how much work was put into making those happen. They were fun, but really an insane amount of work. I do like the idea though of having quarterly events, be they on Zoom or in person, or even hybrid again, if it's really exciting, on different topics that relate to sustainability. I think for the neighborhood council as a body, sustainability has been relegated to, you know, trees and cleanups. And it's broader than that. And there's a lot of information folks in the community want to know. There are resources that they can be connected to. There are dialogues and discussions that can be had that can serve. And if we had thematic, you know, for a year around different themes that are connected to sustainability that were, you know, informative and helpful for folks and could create dialogue, I think that would be great. But again, I just want to just note how much work the old Green Living Fair was. Fun though it was, they were an exhausting, thankless amount of work that Lisa put on for years. And I don't think we're up for that again, quite in that same way. If we were to take that on, I would recommend it only be done in partnership with a couple of other neighboring neighborhood councils, and that we would seek funding to support that, because it is well beyond what volunteers should take on.
So it was fun. And I did do a lot of work for it. To start whatever Lisa Kane gave wanted me to do, I did. And you know, it was fun. But I see your point is though.
Any other comments? Scott?
So as far as your page, the committee page on our website, I can give anybody access to it, and you can start adding links and whatever you want. I just threw up there, if you go to your committee page, I just put something on there just so you can see what it would look like. Los Angeles Zoo Draft Plan 2022 Alternative 1.5. So it's there and you click it and it opens it. You can fill it with pretty much whatever you want. And it's quite simple to do. So I'll give anyone the keys to that who wants to start messing around and populating your committee page, if that helps. You can go to your committee page right now and just take a look. It's under the names of all the committee members. That's very easy to do.
I see.
I could take that off. You may not want to link to that, but just threw it up real quick to show you how simple it is. Do you see it?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's a link. You click it, it opens. You can say, you know, whatever you want. You can put your past stuff like anything you've already approved and go, you know, the sustainability approved this motion, the board approved it, and here's a link to our, you know, the council file. It's just freehand. You can type it any way you want. And then if it looks bad, just delete it.
Can you put images up there too?
You can put links to images. Susan's smiling. I think she knows exactly how to do this. And I'm going to give her the password.
She couldn't say no fast enough.
No, because it would be nice to be able to put, like, Susan's got these most amazing pictures, photographs. They're not pictures, they're photographs of like bees and butterflies. I mean, just beautiful. It would be really nice to put images up there.
Well, you could put all her photos in your in the board email address gives you YouTube and Google Photos. So you can upload all those to a Google photo album and then link to it on that page. I don't know if you can actually have photos on it. other than links to photos. I don't see a way to do that. There might be, or maybe that's something we have to get Web Corner to do, but I think it's worth experimenting. And then we'll put in a request for, and you can look at other, if you see this on another neighborhood council's page, I'm looking at Sherman Oaks right now. I'm not seeing any photos from some of their committees other than photos of the committee members. So
I believe Toluca Lake has photos. I've seen their website. Does the SCNC have do they pay anybody to manage their website?
yeah, we have Web Corner.
What is that, a person or a company?
It's a company.
Is it a local person?
Yeah, we can get them to do what we need if it's within the framework of the actual website itself. I'm going to Toluca Lake right now.
The reason I ask is the beautification didn't have any, they had a website that was essentially dead and a zero presence on social media. And I brought in someone to completely revive and redo our website. It's really interactive now. And we also had someone posting on social media, on Instagram and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. But the website person is paid, it's very minimal, but we do pay her. And like I said, she completely refreshed the site and I work with her. And it's got tons of fantastic images.
Come to our next outreach committee meeting.
I'm busy that morning.
So this is like, this is something that Susan just sent about this particular plant that's near Sportsman's, and it's an endangered plant. And I mean, like, this is what I'm thinking, like something like this on a page, it makes you scroll down and read what's below it. Whereas just, I feel like those pages, let me go to the, let's see. Yeah, let's see. Stop. The Studio City, like this is our website, and let me go, how do I get to home? And then how do I get to the, dear,
Go to the top.
I missed it. What, oh, here, I want to get to the committees. Where are they? Here, that's it. I suppose I'll just go here and, yeah, view. This is the committee page. Like it's just.
And that's what Scott just put in.
Yeah, you can see what I just put on.
Yeah, and then you link to the zoo plan.
Right.
Yeah. But it's not very, it's just not a very interesting page visually to me.
Well, how much of that can we adjust? So where it says mission statement, meeting, sustainability committee members, can we?
That doesn't need to be there. No.
But can we say how to get involved?
Yeah.
And then have the links to tree people and the other people that are doing stuff, because it would be cool as well to do a quarterly cleanup in association with either there's that one giant cleanup organization that does nothing but do those, but we could tie something in with tree people or link to another group once a quarter in Studio City.
Scott?
On the left-
The website I meant wasn't Toluca Lake homeowners, it was Toluca Lake Beautification Partners. Do you know that group?
No, but for comparison's sake, if you can find a neighborhood council that has something that looks good to you, that's fine. Where you just were, everything on the left, you can rewrite, you can move around. Peter is raising his hand and he's going to mention that we should go to a different web provider.
Peter, go ahead. And
You can call on Peter.
Well, I wasn't going to say that. I don't know the minutia of what's behind the engine behind the websites that the boilerplate websites that Web Corner is designed to push out to all the neighborhood councils. The one that we had before that, originally we had an old Web Corner website. We had it updated to WordPress, and that one never saw the light of day for various reasons. And then they went back to Web Corner again. I don't think that Web Corner is using WordPress. If it was WordPress, then it makes it very easy for people in the community, all kinds of people to update it. So we'd have to find out from Web Corner what the engine is underneath. Also, it drives me nuts that the pictures that scroll at the top, that carousel of pictures, that one, there's so few of them, and that 3 of 4 of them are mine, which is, come on. And it seems like every committee should be able to put, whatever they want on that carousel. It'd be nice if there was 20 or 30 pictures. So if there was something at the top that related to sustainability, maybe it would lure more people in. As you can see, there's
an FYI, beautification use GoDaddy, which is relatively easy to use.
So this is what I'm talking about is, I see a picture and I want to look, whoops. I feel like this is the website you're talking about, right, Andrew?
Correct. Yeah.
And it just makes me, I don't know, a little bit interested. And then I go down and I'll read it and, look at,
But you might want to, this probably isn't a discussion for this committee, Scott. It's probably more of a bigger picture for the council at large. What you want your website to do.
It took about a year to transition from our old website, which we really had absolutely no control over anything, to the new one, where at least we can modify and add information to the committee pages. The whole point of this transition was to keep as much of the old stuff that's been going on for years, calendar, agendas, and documents and such, and allow committees to update their modules as we were told they were called. So we have to sort of realistically stick with what we have now. We paid for it, and I'll give you the keys and just mess around with it and see what you can and can't do, and then come up with your list of what you like to see and try to base it on other neighborhood councils. There's 99 of them, so you can get cracking on all of those and see which one looks good to you. And of course, you can just have links to other things that you populate. We have a whole new digital media policy, which was just inflicted upon us by Bonk and Dunn. So that's also going to sort of infringe our ability to do some of this free thinking. But start with what we have right now and populate it at least with links and let me know how that goes. I mean, 1 or maybe 2 persons on the committee is probably all that should have the keys to start with. So
Chris Trent has something to say. You're muted though, Chris, or.
Yeah, there's something, I'm having hardware issues. Hang on.
I just want to show you, here is one really beautiful website that is Greater Toluca Lake.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
How about this way?
Yeah.
So should we maybe have more of a direct conversation with the Andrews web designer? Because a lot of times the people who actually design the websites know the ins and outs of what particular services can do.
Right. That's what we did.
I very much agree that having a page full of text and links is close to meaningless. Nobody's gonna spend any time there or click on links. The shot like that you had of the zoo, that picture of whatever kind of animal was, that should be there, a miniature version of it, and just say, here's this. And you should be able to click on pictures, and that will take you, people will follow that. They're not gonna follow text links.
Agreed. And see, this is the Greater Toluca Lake, and this is beautiful.
If you want to look at ours, it's City to City Beautification Association, just for a quick show and tell.
And we have what, like
That's it.
1,200 followers now, Andy?
More like, well, I'm not, that's on Instagram. We have about, well, click on the X up there, get rid of that X. Yeah. And so there's all the, you know, what we are, the mission statement, the project. If you go to projects, this is a video that I shot. We did a campaign, a video campaign. But if you go up to projects, there's a drop down and it shows all of the things that we have adopted, and then and there's tons and tons. If you click on each page, there's just tons of beautiful photographs. And then there's always that. We make that as a default.
Mm-hmm.
It shows where it is on the map, and then
Wow.
yeah, the same woman that I worked with to design the website also shot the photos. She's a professional photographer and web designer.
So these are all the different.
Those are all the projects that the Beautification
Look, Paul Cook-
Association has adopted and maintained.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also ways to contribute. There's a resource page, you know, who to call if you see a broken street light, and I assume you have all that on neighborhood council as well.
Wow.
This took us a couple of 3 months to do, just to convert it, to shoot it and then convert it and make it active.
It's much. See, I think that if you want an interactive site, you have to do pictures, because that's what, you know,
Yeah.
people, they just respond to pictures.
And with GoDaddy, we also were able to drop like a 30-second video that we shot and produced.
But
Yeah.
we're not gonna be able to go to GoDaddy, so we need to find a way to figure out how to replicate that user experience with the platform we have, right, Scott?
That would be the realistic way to go.
Why start now?
I mean, if you go into if I give you the keys, you go into the committee page, you might figure out how to do it. Nobody has experimented yet. There was supposed to be some information from our outreach committee has been handling this. And I know Adele was talking to Brandon about it for a little while, but it never appeared on an outreach agenda. So I don't think any of the committees have actually expressed an interest in populating their own modules.
I mean, my almost 21-year-old in 2 days, I guess, is going to be home for Thanksgiving, and he has a pretty good digital marketing penchant. So I will sit him in this chair, this being his room anyhow. And I'll talk to you, Scott, and I'll sit there and see what he can do to start putting it together. Because Susan, you've got a bunch of photos too, right?
Yeah, Susan has great photos. Could you both send like even just a few? You need photos if he's going to populate it with
Yeah,
photos.
yeah. Let me put out the call. We'll put out just kind of, what do they call that? A wireframe to find out what the topics will be, and then we'll start linking to. Then we'll start asking for photos, and behind the photo, we'll embed the links to go to those areas. But like one of the things, like if you truly found that the Nevins barberry that was planted on the north side of the Greenway is being, because plants only move by wind, wing, and water, right? Those 3 W's is how they move. If we can show, because remember that planting for the north side of the Zev Greenway was funded by a carbon offset grant because of the widening of the 405. So as the 405 got wider, they had to do some plantings. That's where the money came from for that particular greenway. If we can show that that's vital enough that it's now propagating to the south side, that's a really big story that we should be telling in sustainability, that establishment of habitat as part of these carbon offsets is creating a successful and dynamic environment where the plants that were rescued from the brink of extinction are now propagating in the most improbable place underneath the concrete behind what used to be Jerry's Deli. I mean, and, you know, that's kind of the story that we could talk about, and there would be some leverage points there for some of the other development conversations that the neighborhood council finds itself involved in.
Yeah, and I also have a species list of what I've seen along that area over the last year, and it's pretty extensive.
And I'll see if I can find who has the original documents for the Zev Greenway. I'm hoping, you know, I still may have one, but I'm sure Beth has one.
I just wrote to Joe Laskin and he's finding it for us.
Oh, shoot, that makes sense because Joe was all over. That would be why
Yeah.
Joe's email. All right, so here's the cool thing, Susan. What if we're finding stuff that's in there now, native plants, native shrubs that are growing in that border on the hillside that weren't planted? You know,
Yeah,
that-
that'd be
that-
interesting to know. I don't know. I kind of know what's there for the most part. It would be interesting to see.
Right, because it's one of those planted, they will come kind of a thing. If we ended up with enough of a broad frame of a native shrub and tree population and other stuff was being dropped off, because a
Right.
bird from somewhere else came over, brought, you know, saw the berries in the Nevins barberry, stopped by after having munched something in my front yard, and now we're suddenly propagating manzanita or toyin all over the place. That's significant because it means that these little pocket habitat beds that we're putting together are working. And those things should be captured and in the photographs.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, so what do you have our next steps here? Chip, for your,
Well, if Scott wants to give the keys to a couple people, does anybody else? I mean, I'll ask him to let me take a look at it. I am ungifted in this, but I will grab my 21-year-old and have him take a look at it and
is Andrew, are you gifted in this?
I am not. I know how to manage people who are gifted in it.
which is why, yeah. I should probably have you manage my son more.
I mean,
than me.
I do my own website for my company, but that's with some help, with some guidance.
Let me see what Griffin can do to keep the chaos to a minimum, and I'll report back and we'll see what we can get.
Okay.
And if anyone had a wish list of things that we think we should do, like I'm talking about having links to an activity calendar, which is basically tree people, but I will see who else has anything going on. And we can sort of troll to find out where there are other opportunities for people to volunteer.
Well, I'd love for Susan to have links to what endangered species, be it bees or, you know, plants, and then we can put a link to the mountain lions for Richard Niederberg.
Thank you. Thank you.
You want to do like an endangered corner, catch them now?
Yeah,
Fast.
yeah, that would be great. I think we should do that. I love that. Because
Endangered animals and plants seen in Studio City.
You just create a blog essentially on your page.
Yeah. I like that.
Well, I think we should also provide information for people on native plants and where they can go to get the soil solutions and the Theodore Payne and things like that, so we can get people more aware of what they can do in their yards.
Well, and I was thinking Theodore Payne, Tree People, California Native Plant Society. There's also a Southern California horticultural group that just came across. Descanso's there, Huntington, LA County Arboretum. I mean, there's a couple easy places to just do an easy thumbnail and a link to go to those places.
Yeah, yeah. I think it would be great. This is what I think would be great. If everyone on the committee come up with one thing they'd like to see on the sustainability website, and then we can organize it, and maybe it's something that we would rotate. I'm not sure. We've got to look at if it's a blog, then it could be, if it's a blog, then you would, blog it. Actually, a blog is kind of a good idea, only because what would happen is people would start coming to see what is, what the sustainability committee is thinking about. So one blog might be about, the dangers of synthetic turf, and one blog might be about the snails and about the Burberry and about, and about the mountain lion, and, and it would be sort of a great, moving.
You have to get eyes on this page.
Yes.
The only way to do that is through social media.
Yes. So you could
Outside this.
we could create an Instagram page that would,
Correct.
yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
So,
Okay, so this is going to be a larger job, but we should start moving towards this so that, that it's fully operational by Earth Day. How does that work as the timing for everybody?
when's Earth Day? I don't even know. I'm bad. April? Okay.
Or Arbor Day, or both.
I have to say, there's a lot of downtime between meetings. Lot. I'm just,
Inferring that no one has anything else in their world except these meetings.
well, it's just that it takes for, like, I'm very frustrated because I have 2 motions now, and it's going to take another month before they get heard.
Well, no, we could do that the first week in December.
That's true.
I'll
All
just
right.
need to work with you around my ad hoc, because there'll be a meeting for that. I'm shooting for the first, Scott, I'm shooting for the first Tuesday after Thanksgiving for the ad hoc.
Okay,
Okay, so do we have any other business for sustainability?
I have a question.
Yes.
Have you discussed the wildlife ordinance that the city is proposing?
We did.
Are you taking position on it? I'm just curious, because it is a massive ordinance that will have tremendous impact on a lot of people, good and bad, I think. But I would think that this committee would be laser focused on that. That's just because I know they're having a hearing in a day or so, tomorrow or day after. And I know that the first time they put it out, they got a ton of reaction from homeowners, contractors, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, I don't know. I've read some of it, but I'm just curious if this committee's digging into it.
We did dig into it when it first came out. I'm not up to speed. Do you know are they implementing the ordinance as it was written, or is it?
No.
They've modified it. It's 8 o'clock Thursday morning, isn't it?
They're having a public hearing.
Yeah.
I was going to go attend it. It's either 8 or 9 o'clock on Thursday morning.
it's 8:30.
Okay.
I mean, just from a very selfish point of view, I'll just tell you, I'm working on a project up in the Studio City Hills, and they're in the wildlife corridor, but they also have their own property, and they want to be able to protect their own property. But this ordinance essentially would have holes in the fence so that, wildlife can go through without being interrupted. So, I mean, from a homeowner's point of view and a safety point of view, it was a big red flag. So there's things, like I said, that are good and bad in this ordinance. And I haven't studied it enough, but I think it's a pretty big deal for Studio City.
It is.
And earlier you were saying, you want to be able to deal with things before they sort of get voted on, before they have an impact. I'm just saying, I think it's going to be a potentially big deal. Just throwing it out there.
Go ahead, Scott.
So other neighborhood councils had multiple meetings on that topic. I think one of them had 10 meetings, and they formed a motion that was, I believe, in opposition. They wanted some changes. Our land use committee took up the issue. There was a very short motion. Because the attendance was so high, we tried to schedule a special meeting, and there was not enough board interest for a quorum for a special meeting, and that deadline passed. And there was no additional sort of involvement since that point. And now it's on our agenda, notifying people of when the hearing is taking place and links to the ordinance, but we really never dove in to that like a couple other neighborhood councils did. So we didn't have the I guess the wherewithal and the expertise to dig into the details of it, but other neighborhood councils did.
Well,
we
as an observer, I would say maybe your land use committee, I don't know who they are, might want to attend that meeting.
Yeah.
Just to get a feel of the temperature of the room of what this ordinance is going to do, which direction it's headed.
Well, the prior land use committee dropped quite a few land use issues. So there's a new land use committee and they all know about it. We'll see if anyone cares to attend. There's a bit of a malaise going on.
This was very important to us. A lot of properties in the city back right into the conservancy land. And it's gonna be poles in the fence where there is a fence, actually, between people's side yards and the Santa Monica Conservancy area.
So when I did go to the previous meetings, and it's a really interesting issue because a lot of the people who are against the ordinance are developers, people who want to be able to build lot to lot, and they don't want to preserve parts of land for wildlife. I mean, like
It's also homeowners.
Yeah, no.
Or, I agree with you, but it's also.
But what I saw is, that fellow Habib, whatever his name is, he destroyed a mountaintop. And I happened to play tennis at a court right below the mountain that he destroyed. And when we would be playing tennis there, we would see deer wandering around completely confused and getting caught in the temporary fencing he had put up. And, and it's been sitting there, and he wants $250 million for the mountain. And, it's basically he messed up the mountain and then has left it there because he doesn't have any more money. So I think parts of the wildlife ordinance are trying to prevent that kind of build out where it's just really raping the land. I mean, really seriously doing that. And then other parts of it are maybe too restrictive for homeowners, or make homeowners have to jump through a bunch of hoops in order to rebuild or do this or that. But, I don't think that any group is going to really reach consensus, because there's parts of the thing that are really good and there's parts of the thing that are problematic. And, and then you just get into this tug of war with, big developers who are just like want to kill the whole thing. And, I think what ended up happening is that the people who went, they figured, it's a trial. They're trying to figure something out, and they need to move forward and stop just talking about it, and then see which parts of the wildlife ordinance will work and which part of the wildlife ordinance are actually dangerous or don't work. And that, and I don't know how to do that except through experience, and I think that's where the city is at this point. They're just like, let's just push something through to find out the answers to some of the questions.
Yeah.
I'll send notes around after the Thursday meeting and let you know how it's changed from the first one.
I'll try to go myself as well.
Because landscaping is a big part of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Big part of it.
If you want, I can read you the motion that the previous land use committee prepared, that we couldn't get a quorum for a special meeting. It's really short.
Go for it.
The board of the City Neighborhood Council supports, and then there's the numbers, the proposed wildlife district ordinance, and recommend the inclusion of native woodlands as a resource per a National Park Service map circa 2006. This motion is to be submitted to city planning and our members of the city council. I gotta tell you, that's not much of a motion. I know what it says. I don't know what the circa 2006 map is, and that's probably why the topic was then dropped. To tell you, just to be truthful, that's it. That's what they came up with, and that's all we had. And since then, things have changed in our land use committee, but it's a huge topic. There's another NC up in the Laurel Canyon Hills. I forget the actual name. They had pages and pages of documentation regarding this and what they felt was right and what they felt was wrong. And we could have just sort of piggybacked on that.
I think that was written by Jamie Hall.
Correct.
Yeah, who's a land use attorney.
So I think our motion was really not much of a motion.
But because there's such a great divide in terms of goals, I think that the problem is just coming to consensus, because there's, you just have, it's a really big divide and that's a problem.
I think when I had a conversation with one of the field deputies, and I think they were really surprised at the public reaction to the first ordinance, public and developers and everybody. And that's why they're having this another hearing. So.
And they've altered the plans in reaction to the initial public hearing.
Right, that's right.
If the side yards were just actually done as the regular side yard code is, it would solve a lot of the problems. But stuck in there. Not just gas meters, but other things also. So not need as much of these other ordinances. And we could walk through. Besides that, people have pool areas and the fencing around a pool, which is required by code, would have to be modified because sometimes the fences are just wall to wall. Because of those, that's my idea.
Well, I'm happy to put it on the next agenda. I don't know how fast it's going to be pushed through or not. Do you, Chip?
Let me see what we find out on Thursday. And that will guide whether it's going to move too quickly. I can't imagine anything this contentious touched by the city over the holidays moving fast.
Yeah, me either.
But I'll circle back on it.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I am being introduced by Ivan Castillo, who is the Tree People staffer who is MRCA has responsibility for the Zev Greenway. Tree People is working with MRCA for maintenance. For 23, Tree People and Northeast Trees, which is Joe Laskin, are going to split the responsibility for maintaining that area. Northeast Trees is going to finish where the stone facing on the retaining walls, the decorative facing wasn't done. There's some hardscape infrastructure that needs to be updated, and Northeast Trees will do that. Tree people will do the rest of the soft stuff. I've spoken to tree people about a larger project that Peter and Scott and I were discussing with regards to the area around Alcove. And I have now been introduced, although she has not responded, to the MRCA staffer that is in charge of the Zev Greenway. So we actually are starting to put points together as to who's doing what to whom on that area. I find that to be real progress. And we can start to talk about what they're doing next year in the Zev Greenway. And Scott, it's not impossible to do what we spoke about with potentially that screen. Tree People's protective of the plants they've already put there. And I've said they need to be 100 years older than what you put in there. It's, you know, it's never going to give us the screening we need. But there's some good things for the future that could potentially come from an association with these people. So that's all good news.
One quick question about all of that. In the Harvard Westlake project, they want to build an ADA ramp right through those native plants area. You know that, right?
Yeah, actually, they don't want to. They were forced to by Krikorian.
No, not the one not one that Krikorian forced them to do was the one
On Coldwater?
on Coldwater. Yeah.
Yeah, what we're talking about right now envisions from the Harvard Westlake lot line west. So
I'm directionally challenged. Where?
towards Coldwater from the end of the golf course.
Coldwater. Yeah. Oh, putting a ramp.
Putting a fence and planting to screen all those homes from all the activity now.
Oh, I got you.
And potentially during the construction.
Okay, you're not talking about the Zev Greenway where you planted millions of dollars worth of native plants.
Yeah, no, it still comes in that direction. It's still like the Hirsch family wildflower garden, all of that is west of the end of the Harvard Westlake property line, but it's still on the Greenway.
Towards Coldwater, you mean towards Coldwater? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
The view of Airborne.
But I'm thinking that ADR ramp that they want, that's right in the middle.
It's not part of what we're talking about, though.
Okay.
Is it by Bel Air Street?
No, it's farther west than that, Richard. Because Bel Air dead ends into the golf course, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's farther west than that. So in theory, none of what we're talking about, hypothetically, we haven't had a meaningful meeting. In theory, nothing that we're talking about would be impacted by anything Harvard Westlake may do on the Weddington Golf and Tennis site. Studio City Golf and Tennis site.
Right. Got it.
So we met some people. That's a good thing. We've always wondered who we talked to about that, and we've made some progress.
Great.
I motion we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Sure, second.
Okay, all in
Thank you,
favor?
Melanie.
In favor.
Okay. All right. I'm going to probably call a special meeting in December for those two motions. And I'll let you know.
And hopefully I will have some kind of an update on the wildlife corridor legislation by then.
Okay, perfect. I'll
Thank
put
you.
that on the agenda too.
Cool.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.